This is part 6 of the reading of the little booklet by Theophil Christen called The Alternative to Capitalism and Socialism. Page 29. Production and Rate of Interest. When prices rise, as often happens with our present economic system, production increases. New enterprises and extensions of those already in existence become profitable. Employers are therefore prepared to borrow more extensively, and as their businesses are prosperous, they can afford to pay a higher rate of interest, which the banks accordingly demand and receive. And wages also rise with the increasing demand for labor. With falling prices, on the contrary, production is arrested. Instead of new enterprises and extensions come difficulties in payment and bankruptcies. The banks, after a temporary high rate of interest during the panic, must be content with low interest, as that is all their clients can afford. Unemployment spreads and wages fall. Interest and wages under capitalism. Each block represents the produce of 1 year's work. The shaded left half of each block represents what is bought by the receivers of interest. The black right half represents the portion bought by the receivers of wages. Both shares increase during the rise of prices and sink to a minimum during the crisis. With an arbitrary currency system, such as the gold standard, this is the inevitable cycle. Interest and wages under national free economy. The course of events with freed money is quite different. Here also interest and wages at first rise together. But as soon as the rate of interest begins to fall, the wage earners' share, including the wage paid for the employer's work, increases. But although the wage earners' share increases greatly, the share that falls to the receivers of interest need not decrease. This is because with currency stabilization and freed money, when the rate of interest falls, production increases, but the total amount paid as interest need not increase, as more money is borrowed with the decreasing rate of interest. Why production increases with the falling rate of interest is easily explained. As long as the rate of interest stands at 4% or 5%, no capitalist will put money into an enterprise from which he expects less than 4%. But there are many useful enterprises which would be profitable if money for their exploitation were available at 3%. Still more enterprises would pay with money at 2%. All these enterprises must wait till the general rate of interest has reached the lower level. Creditors, as long as they can obtain 4%, will give money for 3%. But if they can obtain 3%, they will give none for 2%. But with the general fall in the rate of interest, if no debtor is forced to pay more than 3% or 2%, creditors must place their loans at 3% or 2%. There remains the possibility of keeping the money in a safe, but there, thanks to the legal demurrage of freed money, it causes its possessor a continual loss, which is worse than no interest at all. Many valuable enterprises would become possible if there were a permanent fall in the rate of interest. New means of communication, factories, shipyards, water power, land improvement, etc. And for all these enterprises, labor would be required, not alone manual labor, but brain work in proportion. Thus, the fall in the rate of interest causes a great demand for labor, and a corresponding rise in wages. In the whole history of industry, this has never happened. A low rate of interest has hitherto always been accompanied by low wages. But it must be remembered that up to the present, the cause of the fall in the rate of interest and the rate of wages has always been a general fall of prices, an event impossible with a stabilized currency. It is important to note that the increase of income from work is greater by far than the decrease of income from interest. To the income from work is added not alone what the income from interest loses, but the increase in the whole produce to be divided. Let no one say that the developments here described are impossible, because they have hitherto never been realized. Aeroplanes and x-rays were also once things that have never been realized. In dealing with such world-moving ideas, our petty ways of thinking must be abandoned, and everything must be examined earnestly and objectively. Only thus can we discover whether the new idea is sound. If it is wrong, we prove the error and pass on to the order of the day. If it is sound, we help to realize it. And realize it will be, in spite of dismal prophecies from those whose ideas have been superseded. Let us now turn to the future, when other countries begin to notice the prosperity of the country which has adopted free economy, and when they introduce the same reforms. Let us now turn to the future, when other countries begin to notice the prosperity of the country which has adopted free economy, and when they introduce the same reforms. Interest and wages under international free economy. Interest on capital then loses its last refuges and falls to zero. The development, which we showed beginning in Figure 11, is then completed in Figure 12. Compare, finally, Figure 13, which represents the wages under communism. Here, every workman receives an equal share of the whole product of labor, but the share is very small. Communism means poverty for all. Capitalism means riches for the few and poverty for the many. Free economy means prosperity for all. Let us now turn to the future, when other countries begin to notice the prosperity of the country which has adopted free economy, and when they introduce the same reforms. Interest on capital then loses its last refuges and falls to zero. The development, which we showed beginning in Figure 11, is then completed in Figure 12. Compare, finally, Figure 13, which represents the wages under communism. Here, every workman receives an equal share of the whole product of labor, but the share is very small. Communism means poverty for all. Capitalism means riches for the few and poverty for the many. Free economy means prosperity for all. To be continued